Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. And thank you to Jean and Alzheimer Europe and Henry and Alzheimer Scotland for the invitation to speak and to be part of this exciting cutting-edge conference. I also wish to acknowledge the Alzheimer Society of Ireland and Acquired Brain Injury Ireland for facilitating my participation. In many ways, it's no coincidence that we are here in Scotland talking about human rights and dementia. Scotland has led the way in creating a dialogue in relation to human rights in a range of contexts and has created structures that are recognised internationally as best practice. Scotland is one of the very few countries that has a Charter of Rights for people with dementia and carers, and is unique in having explicitly manifested this Charter as the core guiding principles in their successive national dementia strategies. So I feel very privileged to be able to share in this human rights and dementia themed session here with you this morning. My presentation, as this title suggests, presents an analysis of the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities as a possible instrument for people with dementia and their carers. To add to this analysis, I draw on the learning from a series of applied rights-based work spanning a number of years during my time with the Alzheimer Society. This work involved the leadership and commitment of several people in the organisation, some of whom are here today, and I'm honoured to be chosen to be the one to share some of the learnings from that work. But before I go on, let's take a moment. What comes into your head when you hear the words human rights? These are some of the automatic images that come to the fore for me. But how often in our day-to-day work do we actually hear, read, or put together the words human rights and dementia? In my experience, rarely, if ever, is there an explicit reference to rights and dementia, although we do talk often about it in a roundabout way. The human rights lens has not been applied in any depth in relation to the lived experience, the policy response, or the services that are provided to people with dementia and their carers. However, in recent years, a number of rights-based initiatives have appeared on the dementia landscape. As a result, there is a new and emerging dialogue in dementia. There are a number of contributory factors to the shift in tone and emphasis, not least the elevation of the voice of the person with dementia. In this photo, you are seeing the Irish Dementia Working Group members. National and international legislation also provides frameworks. One such international instrument is the 2006 UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. This international treaty promotes and protects the rights of the person with a disability. It aims to ensure their enjoyment of human rights and equality under the law. If we view dementia as a disability, then the Disability Convention has significant relevance and meaning and can shape the field of dementia at the global and local levels. Today, I will not talk about the technical or legal aspects of the UN Disability Convention. There are other opportunities to hear about that over the next 2 days. I will focus instead on sociological meanings, philosophy and principles. The implications of the UN Convention for people with dementia may be several, but in the time I have here with you this morning, I will set them out in 3 interrelated themes. Firstly, the Convention provides a framework to rethink and reimagine dementia as a rights, a social justice and an equality issue, and helps us to reframe how we talk dementia and who does the talking. Secondly, it can act as a catalyst of change as we begin to move towards the social rights-based model of dementia. People with dementia in this model are themselves the change agents. There is also a major shift in the power dynamics and stakeholder relationships. Thirdly, the Convention promotes us utilising a specific human rights-based approach in our work. Using human rights-based approaches impacts on how policy gets shaped, how services are provided, what research gets done, how we advocate, fundraise and communicate in the public spheres. So to unpack each of these themes a little more, in terms of the first theme and the UN Convention providing a framework to rethink and reimagine dementia, it clearly has the potential to lead the dementia discourse in a new and exciting direction. Using human rights as the starting point, no longer will we talk for people with dementia. No longer will the diagnosis of dementia be disclosed to the family member only. No longer will the diagnosis of dementia assign the person to a new social grouping, often characterised by marginalisation, isolation and oppression. The social construction of dementia will no longer be characterised by fear, stigma and negativity. A new construction will emerge. If we pursue a human rights agenda, we will move from the deficit-based thinking in terms of social policies for people with dementia, where they are currently often discounted, viewed as somewhat less human, and are considered less deserving of respect. A human rights approach argues that we need to view people with dementia as a legitimate part of the mainstream. At present, we have no expectations of people with dementia. We immediately jump to protect them from everything and guard their interests, and often in so doing actually create engines of oppression. Probably where we see this mostly manifested in public policy terms is through the inappropriate institutionalisation of people with dementia. In our hurry to protect people, we consign them to institutions which all too often expose people to abuse, further discounting the agency of the person. So behind closed institutional doors, people are removed from their communities and natural supports. Their voices are silenced and they are rendered passively dependent. We have to break the link between the deficits model of policy making. Article 19 of the Disability Convention offers real hope as it enshrines people with disabilities' rights to live in a community, as well as promoting personalised services and together creating a pathway of care that supports that person. In our reimagining, people with dementia will be part and parcel of who we are as a people and a society. If we believe in human rights, no longer will we tolerate the lack of investment in services and supports for people with dementia. We will demand, as a right, to have appropriate levels of investment in what people with dementia and their carers need to continue to live fulfilled lives as active citizens. Our reimagining will also allow us to move beyond seeing people with dementia and their carers as charity cases towards a human rights approach where they enjoy the same rights and flourish in their lives. No longer will we have the begging bowl mentality and people objectified by their dementia as in need of charity and sympathy. Speaking in Dublin at the launch of the Human Rights and Older People Policy Paper, Professor Gerard Quinn, an Irish academic, human rights lawyer, and one of the architects of the UN Convention said, "It seems to me that the history of human rights is really a history of gradually admitting all of humanity, group by group, into its fold. And now we have the opportunity to have people with dementia to be welcomed into the fold." Human rights perspectives also force a rethink of language and the language we use to describe dementia. Language is not a minor issue. It is in fact critical, as it is one of the ways in which we erect fences around the human fold. How many times have we heard dementia being referred to as a ticking time bomb, a global epidemic, or a tsunami? The living death, suffering from, the demented patient. Is this human rights language? So as you can see, human rights goes to the very heart of what dementia is, the language we use, and how it can positively impact on the lived experience. The second major theme I will explore in terms of the potential impact of the Disability Convention is that human rights approaches can bring about changes at many levels. The Convention is a very strong exponent of the social model of disability. So much has been written about the social model of disability, and it is spilling over into the dementia dialogue, especially in relation to the contemporary debates on stigma. The disability rights movement in the last 4 decades has taken the massive journey away from the medical model to placing the social model at the centre of disability discourse. Of all that is written about in terms of the social model, there are 2 words that I've chosen to use that I believe go to the very heart of the issue. They are power and control. The social model really questions who has the power in the relationship and who has the control. This model is very explicit in stating that it is those living with the disability who should have the power and the control. Not having control over what happens in your life and not having the power to make choices and be self-determining leads to the shift in the person from being an active subject to an object of pity and passivity. The need to protect the person with dementia, as I've referred to earlier, has consequences. In particular, taking away their voice, which once lost is so hard to regain. And I'm referring not only to the individual, but to the collective voice. Finding a collective voice can really be a powerful tool for change, and no one can deny the authentic voice of the lived experience. As the collective voice grows, the ability to become true agents of change is realised. There are a few great examples of the power of the collective voice of people with dementia. Go no further than the well-established Scottish Dementia Working Group and the more fledgling Irish Dementia Working Group, and at the EU level, the European Group. This is human rights in action. If we push the boundaries of our understanding of dementia to include a human rights focus, then dementia can be framed and responded to as a social justice and equality issue, as much as it is a health and social care issue. Human rights can therefore be the catalyst in terms of how people with dementia and carers lived empowered lives of their own choosing. Human rights can be the catalyst in terms of how people with dementia and their carers are supported by society and the nature of that support. Human rights can be the catalyst to add to the social, economic and political agency of the person with dementia and their carer. Equally pertinent in terms of the social model is that it is the perfect frame for the current drive towards developing dementia-friendly communities. Dementia-friendly communities are really a manifestation of the social model of disability in practice. They're not about changing the person and getting them to fit in, but instead they're about changing and altering the social, attitudinal, architectural and physical environments in which people with dementia and carers live to be responsive and adapt to people's situation. Dementia-friendly communities are all about inclusion and the coming together of communities to challenge the current status quo, often characterised by discounting and silencing, social isolation and ongoing inequalities. The Disability Convention also opens up the opportunity and creates the possibilities for many of the concepts to be translated from the global perspective to the local context. Again, the dementia-friendly community work is a perfect example. So instead of viewing the UN Disability Convention as an abstract concept, as something out there that has little relevance to people's lives, we should seize the opportunity to use the Convention to have local relevance and applicability. The third and final theme I will explore is how the UN Disability Convention promotes the use of a human rights-based approach to manifest the principles of rights into practice. The human rights-based approach, HRBA, applies 5 principles called the panel principles to any process. The Scottish Human Rights Commission describes the panel approach on their website, and Colin has already referred to it. Under P for participation, everyone has the right to participate in decisions which affect their human rights. Participation must be active, free and meaningful. The A is accountability requires effective monitoring of human rights standards as well as effective remedies for human rights breaches. The N for non-discrimination and equality means that all forms of discrimination in the realisation of rights must be prohibited, prevented and eliminated. It also requires the prioritisation of those in the most marginalised or vulnerable situations who face the biggest barriers to the realisation of their rights. The E is for empowerment of rights holders. Individuals and communities should understand their rights and be fully supported to participate in the development of policy and practices which affect their lives. Individuals and communities should be able to claim their rights where necessary. Finally, the L in panel relates to the legality of rights in that HRBA requires the recognition of rights as legally enforceable entitlements and is linked to national and international human rights law. The recently published Human Rights and Older People in Ireland policy paper argues that HRBA can be applied in many circumstances, including the development of government policy, the allocation of funding by the state, the development of legislation, how research is conducted, and how services are designed, delivered, monitored and evaluated. HRBA has a real potential to offer a practical tool to the world of dementia. It not only provides a framework to examine our practice, but to proactively seek to begin to utilise a human rights-based approach in all of our work. In the context of dementia, it would mean a sea change in how we conduct our business, including how services are designed and delivered, how we communicate about and describe dementia in the public arena, how we fundraise and portray people with dementia as the key beneficiaries, how we engage in research and what type of research agenda gets set, how we do advocacy, how we formulate advocacy messages, and the nature and type of engagement with policymakers and politicians. There are so many vested interests, but we need to start to look at how we are responding as Alzheimer organisations, clinicians, healthcare professionals, funders, academic and service providers. We need examination at every level, individual, institutional and systemic. There is no situation where HRBA doesn't apply. It is a game changer. So to conclude, clearly the UN Disability Convention is not the panacea and it has its own shortcomings. And there are other UN human rights universal treaties that have relevance to people with dementia. Shortcomings have been identified in the Disability Convention, particularly by organisations concerned with the issues of ageing, and that there may be a need for the UN to look at developing a specific instrument on ageing. Already there is a UN open-ended working group on ageing, and debates and discussions are underway in member states. It is the people with dementia who are here with us today, who are now the global ambassadors for dementia rights. As important and integral as the G8 countries and leaders are in terms of systemic change and promoting research, it is people with dementia who stand together to provide leadership on a global scale to bring about change, to radically alter their lived experience. The Disability Convention not only therefore provides inspiration, but it's a great excuse to do something. I hope I have illustrated how it opens up possibilities and opportunities for people with dementia to take a distinct view of their world and elevate their voices at the centre. Equally critical, it is the job of those of us who work in the dementia field to recognise this and support them. We need to walk alongside people and provide support and leadership in the field. This will undoubtedly change the power dynamics, alter the locus of control, and usurp existing stakeholder relationships, and perhaps even alter a few job descriptions. Alzheimer organisations in particular need to provide the blueprints for change, and through their advocacy make proposals to governments who are very often void of ideas to make change happen. Some sceptics of the human rights approach may think that it only really applies to people at the early stages. How wrong. Human rights and using the human rights-based approach applies across the whole journey of dementia. It could be argued that there's an inverse relationship here. The further one travels on the dementia journey, the more relevant and meaningful is human rights in terms of addressing the increasing risks of marginalisation, isolation and oppression, as well as the increasing risks of experiencing systemic inequalities, abuse and institutionalisation, a very heady cocktail. I know the jury is still out in terms of framing dementia as a disability, but if we are to take the overall theme of this conference seriously and begin to address the issues using human rights lens, I would argue that there is a real merit in viewing dementia as a disability. I'm going to finish by borrowing a quote from the disability rights movement, who in turn borrowed it from the Indigenous Aboriginal community in Australia to illuminate my core message to you here this morning. It goes, "If you come only to help me, you can go back home. But if you consider my struggle as part of your own struggle for survival, then maybe we can work together." Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for an interesting intervention. We have time for one question. I see somebody there, please.
Thank you. I would like to say that was an outstanding talk. Thank you very much. I have a conflict. I'll keep it brief. I have a conflict of interest. I'm physically disabled. My name is Dr. Shibli Rahman. I'm trained as an academic and a practitioner in law and medicine, dementia. I'd like to make two comments, if I may, quickly, panel. First of all, we should be mindful of age discrimination the other way in research and policy. I particularly am interested, in my own background from Cambridge and Queen Square, of younger onset dementia and people below the age of 65 who can experience quite awful age discrimination of services not suitable for them. I agree totally with the inappropriate use of the word suffering all the time, but also I'd like to point out that in the journey there are younger people with dementia who also are on this journey too, and it shouldn't be focused on older people all the time. And second comment I should like to make, panel chairman, sir, is that I think as a lawyer we have to be careful about silos too. I obviously agree in the inalienable rights, human rights, UN, European rights. I fully sign up to the wonderful work in Scotland. But likewise, I'm researching currently unfair dismissal, equality law. Dementia can be a disability under English my jurisdiction law. I'm finding a very lack of proper evidence policy on this, on supporting people, especially younger onset dementia, if I may be selective, ironically, about protecting the rights of people in the employment practice too. And may I politely say, we ought to be careful about silos here too. And we need proper policy on young onset dementia. And I would like to have seen that under the current government in dementia-friendly communities, but maybe my next government will do so properly, if I may say that.
Thanks a lot for the information. Okay.
Thank you. And I have to say, if the under 65 issue probably allows, really we should have a whole discourse specifically around people who are under 65s, and I suppose the double whammy of having living with the dementia and having access to no services, and the abyss that is there in terms of policy and recognition of people within the system. So I agree. The issue about silos, I suppose I'm not a fan of silos either, but equally I think we need to bring this lens to this particular issue to begin to highlight the discrimination and the oppression that is there. You know, ideally we're moving to a much more mainstream discourse, but I think for the moment we just have to stick in our silos.